Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about what's happening with Wizards of the Coast. So there was a huge story that came out through D&D commentators yesterday, and also came out through OSR commentators. D&D commentators were like, "Oh no," and OSR like, "Yay!" And the reason why was Wizards of the Coast took a hit. They took a hit financially in Q3 of 2022 for Wizards of the Coast, who makes Dungeons and Dragons, the PHB you're looking at right now. They lost $60 million over their. I think it's a revenue number for of their total amount made was $60 million shorter last year. Was light, right? Lower last year than it was in 2022 than it was in 2021. So Q3 2022 WOTC revenue $60 million less than in 2021. So that no executive wants that. Right? That's very bad, right? So why is that? So I heard a lot of people talking about it, but I didn't really hear anybody talking about why. So I'm going to give you my humble opinion of why. This is the reason why. This is Mythic Odysseys of Theros. The reason why Wizards of the Coast, in my humble opinion, is $60 million short on 2022 Q3 revenue, right? Is this book, and basically not this. It's this book and 100 other actions that Wizards of the Coast has taken, which is represented by this book, which is what? Intellectual property expansion. So you got, Dungeons and Dragons. This is Magic the Gathering, right? This book is Wizards of the Coast saying, hey, locations, characters, races, artifacts, relationships from Magic the Gathering are getting slammed, collided, combined, connected directly into Dungeons and Dragons. But Magic the Gathering isn't even remotely the end of that story. It is intellectual property. Dungeons and Dragons' intellectual property is being connected to literally hundreds, if not well over 1,000 different intellectual properties are being connected to Dungeons and Dragons. And this is incredibly exciting for some Dungeon Masters and Dungeons and Dragons players. It is very alarming to people who claim to be D&D players but actually are playing a lot of OSR. And it's really frightening for a number of remaining Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeon Masters and Dungeons and Dragons players who don't understand what's happening. And guess what? I have incredible sympathy for them. This is the deepest end of the narrative pool. Intellectual property expansion is a completely modern concept, and it is and what's happening on Dungeons and Dragons specifically is unprecedented. The amount of intellectual property expansion that's happening on Dungeons and Dragons has never been done on any product in the history of the planet, and it is truly incredible, and it's very alarming, and it's confusing for customers, right? So, was Wizards of the Coast wrong to go down this road? Absolutely not. Leaders take their people to places that they don't want to go. Moses led the Israelites into the desert, right? You know why? To find the promised land. And that's where we're going. What's happening right now with Dungeons and Dragons will be, in my humble opinion, a Supreme Court decision 35 years from now. And the work that the modern dungeon master, and absolutely no OSR player in the world, in my game master in the world, in my humble opinion, but the work that modern dungeon masters and modern Dungeons and Dragons players are doing in intellectual property expansion right now is going to aid literally every single human genre that connects to narrative and storytelling. And we are literally on the bleeding edge right now, right? We're taking the losses for bushwhacking, right? Human narrative. That's what's happening, and that's why we're down $60 million, right? Is because when you bushwhack, you're at the front line, right? You have a machete and you are cutting through the brambles, and the thorns are tearing at your flesh, and a whole bunch of easy people are going to walk the same path later. And so the reason that Wizards of the Coast, in my humble opinion, is $60 million down on Q3 revenue for 2022 is because they have courage. They're not going to sit back and just not lead humanity into a stronger, better way of telling stories. And so this right here, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, it's this book and plus, it's everything that is being done. Warhammer, right? Like, the Soul Ring in the new Warhammer cards, you will find that Soul Ring on the Magic the Gathering Warhammer cards. You will find that Soul Ring in Magic the Gathering Dominaria, and you will find that Soul Ring in Forgotten Realms. It's been printed in all three, right? And it's confusing and it's scary. And we're in the desert right now, right? But we're headed to the promised land. And I highly applaud the amazing courage of Wizards of the Coast. And this is why I'm a Dungeons and Dragons fan. This is why I'm not an OSR, wannabe that cheers when the leader who's bushwhacking the path you literally walk on gets cut with the thorns. So understand, OSR is just bitter and sad. Wizards of the Coast it's bleeding right now. It's on the bleeding edge. There's no two ways around that. And they're taking the losses for doing something that nobody else has the courage to do. That's my humble opinion. I'm eager to hear yours. Let me know in comments below. Please consider subscribing and have a wonderful millennium.